Live from Keene, New Hampshire, the most watched TV news show in Keene, the Keene Weekly News with Mark Edgington. Coverage of local and national events starts now.
Fellow Keeniacs, this is the Keene Weekly News. My name's Mark Edgington. This is the first ever live edition, and I've got to say, I envy you all for being out there and being able to witness it. In this week's news, looks like civil unions have cleared the Senate 14-10 here in New Hampshire, right along party lines. I guess the Democrats want the gay folks to be able to get married and the Republicans don't. Well, local reactions are mixed. I've got to say, my reaction on this is a little mixed myself. Now, I'm all for gay people being able to get married, having the right to get married. I think that it's your right to be able to decide with whom you contract. That's what marriage is. It's a contract to spend the rest of your life with someone, to love, honor, cherish, the whole deal. At the same time, I also understand that employing someone is a contract. And this doesn't allow for full freedom in that area of employment. Now, the real problem here is government involvement. Now, let me tell you how it doesn't allow for full freedom in that area. If I'm a good Christian businessman and the way I interpret the Bible is that gay people shouldn't be able to get married, then this law, which is going to come into effect on January 1st, is going to force me to offer the benefits that I offer to my heterosexual, straight people that are married, my employees. Then I'm going to have to offer them to the gay ones also. Now, personally, I've got no problem with the idea of offering benefits to employees in that manner. But if I believe the Bible says that that's a bad thing, then who's the state to tell me that I've got to do that? What this is going to result in is gay people not getting jobs that they would have otherwise gotten, because employers are not going to want to offer these benefits. And Keene being a right to work, New Hampshire being a right to work state, you really don't have to give a reason as to why you don't hire somebody. But if you get that, your gaydar goes off and you get that kind of feeling, oh, this person could be gay, I might have to offer benefits to their same-sex marriage partner, then it could be a problem. So my recommendation here is that we get the government out of marriage. I don't see any reason. As a matter of fact, try to think of one reason. Think to yourself, give me one reason that the government should be involved in marriage. Why should they be out doling out licenses for a contractual agreement? There's common contractual agreements that go on every day that we don't have the government giving out licenses for. The government doesn't give me a license to get a job. Do I need a license to get married? It just seems ludicrous to me. So, George and Martha Washington, they didn't need a government marriage, and you don't need one either. That way, there won't be any problems when it comes to, who can get married and who can't. As far as I'm concerned, gay people should be able to go get married at whatever church wants to marry them, whatever church is willing to do that. I suspect the Keene Unitarian Universalist Church, where I go, would be happy to do such a thing. Whereas I'm sure there's some denominations in town that would not be willing to do such a thing. That's how we solve this problem, and that's how we make everyone just a little more free. Looks like some graffiti at Keene State University has been sort of pro-Cho, as it were, the Virginia Tech shooter, and there's a lockdown at UNH or something like that. They've had some problems there with bomb threats and that kind of thing. I'll tell you, it's a dangerous situation. I've got to really feel for those 32 people and their families that were killed there at Virginia Tech. It's interesting to juxtapose that story with another story that happened in Manchester. It was last week, and a couple of guys, cretins, go into a bar in Manchester. They cause some trouble there. Some bouncers are going to kick them out. And in return, for the bouncers kicking them out, they decided to fire shots. Fortunately, none of the bouncers were hurt. But there happened to be an armed patron of the bar there that shot the man with the gun. Now, I've got to ask you, what would have happened at Virginia Tech had one of those people in that classroom, whether it was one of the 32 killed or just one of the ones that escaped, what would have happened if one of those people had been armed? I'll tell you for one thing, it's against the law. Virginia outlawed the carrying of weapons on Virginia Tech campus, even if you have a concealed weapons permit. A concealed weapon permit from the government isn't good enough to be able to carry a weapon on Virginia Tech's campus. And as a result, 32 people were killed. New Hampshire has some of the laxest gun laws in the nation, and we have some of the lowest violent crime rates in the nation. I wonder if this in any way corresponds. In New Hampshire, if you so choose, you can carry a gun right on your hip out in the open. Now, of course, businesses have to decide whether or not they want to let you in. I don't imagine it happens enough that businesses really care. They probably assume that if you have a gun in your hip that you're allowed to do so, and you are. They probably assume that you're some kind of government agent or something like that, which you may or may not be. We're all just people, just like those government agents are, so I think we all should be allowed to carry them. But in summary, it's an armed populace that keeps us safe. Looks like the minimum wage proposal is passed here in New Hampshire. Minimum wage is going to go to $7.25 an hour. Now, I don't begrudge anybody making more money. I'm all for people making money. The problem is when you start forcing it on people, forcing it on businesses, forcing it on employees. When these minimum wage laws pass, people lose jobs. That's the simple truth of it. If somebody's working at $5.15 an hour, then a small business owner has to decide, are they worth keeping on at $7.25? And the answer usually is, some are, some aren't. And those people are going to lose jobs. It's as simple as that. It's really Mickey Mouse economics, and it's politicians pandering to people that don't understand how economics works. Mostly the people that make minimum wage, by and large the people that make minimum wage, are under the age of 20. These are people that are getting into the job market, they're learning the skills that it takes, being on time, being courteous to customers, the simple stuff that all of us have learned by being in business for a few years, that it's not worth having them on and training them at $7.25. Now businesses will get by at $7.25. Certainly they're not going to close their doors, not all of them, maybe a few will, and that's the sad part here, is this minimum wage, it hurts just a few people, enough that you'll never even know about it. Look, Arizona did this a couple of years ago, and the results were young people lost their jobs. And it's likely to drive up prices to some extent on things you buy, pizzas and that sort of thing. So, can't say I'm real happy about this whole minimum wage thing. Looks like the United States is looking at doing the same thing. It can be across the board minimum wage increase. I guess we'll get by. Smoking tax. Looks like there's going to be a 45-cent per pack tax increase. That's already on top of, I believe we had, it's a total of $1.30 per pack. That's putting New Hampshire right alongside of Maine and Vermont and Massachusetts as to where its smoke tax is. This is a classic example of the majority forcing their will on the minority. Smokers are in about 20 to 25% of the population. I can't say it's a good health choice, but what is this money going towards? What is this smoking tax going to go towards? Is it going to go towards offsetting the increased health costs of smokers? The smokers bring down on all of us through insurance rates? No, it's going to the government. It's not going to insurance companies. It's just punishment for smoking. You're bad. You smoke. You shouldn't smoke. I don't like the smell of it. It bothers me. Well, you don't have to go places where people are smoking. You own a house. You can say, nobody smokes here in my house. You decide which restaurants you go into. Right there on Main Street, Timoleon's. It's great, by the way. If you get the opportunity, go to Timoleon's for the clam chowder. It's the best you'll ever have. Timoleon's, non-smoking restaurant. How does he do it? How does Timoleon Chocolos manage to run a restaurant without allowing people to smoke? Can you imagine? Well, he does. And you get to choose whether or not you want to go into a restaurant that allows smoking or doesn't. I personally do not want people smoking cigarettes around me when I eat. Now, to juxtapose that, there's Gino's Bar and Grill down on Court Street. Now, I go there generally for karaoke on Wednesday nights, and you should too if you want that kind of good time. But they allow smoking in there. Now, I have to choose every time I want to go in. I don't smoke cigarettes. I don't want to be around people that do smoke cigarettes. I have to choose. I want to go there for karaoke enough that I'm willing to put up with it. And I don't see any reason to shove anti-smoking legislation down people's throats simply because I don't like it. It's using the power of the government to force your opinion on people. And it's sad. People should be able to decide what they want to do in their own business. It's a property rights issue. It's my business. I get to decide whether people smoke in it or not. It's simple. We don't need the legislators doing this kind of thing. And, you know, the seatbelt thing is going to be coming up here shortly. I recommend you give Molly Kelly a call and tell her that you're against mandatory seatbelt legislation, especially primary enforcement. Primary enforcement means if a police officer sees you without your seatbelt on here in New Hampshire, the last state in the union where you're free to choose whether or not you want a seatbelt on, then you can he can pull you right over, give you a ticket for it, gives him an opportunity to look around the car, make sure you're not doing anything wrong. You know, I don't think we need this. If you say to yourself, well, people that don't wear seatbelts drive up the costs of insurance. You know, the seatbelt compliance here in New Hampshire is 64%. Seatbelt compliance in Massachusetts, where it's mandatory to wear them, is 65%. It's a 1% difference. Now, in reality, we have just as many people wearing seatbelts in New Hampshire as they do in Massachusetts. So I don't know that that argument makes any sense, but at the same time, that's an issue between you and your insurance company. Can't you say to your insurance company, but I wear my seatbelt every time I get in the car. As a matter of fact, I'll let you not cover me if I'm not wearing a seatbelt. I think that will solve the problem. We don't need the legislators telling us what to do. Aren't they there supposed to be guarding our freedoms? Isn't that what the purpose of the government here in New Hampshire is to defend our Bill of Rights, the New Hampshire Bill of Rights, the New Hampshire Constitution? Not to be forcing us to do a bunch of different things. Looks like groundwork's being laid for the Keene Roundabout. This is the one on Route 101 and Winchester Street. It's kind of slowing traffic down a little bit. They've got lane closures, that kind of thing. Soon they'll be working on the roundabout at the corner of Winchester, Marlboro, and Main Street. You know, I don't know whether this roundabout's going to make things better or not. I sincerely hope it will, but it's costing a lot of money. And I think that there's some simpler ways to handle this whole roundabout issue. I think we could eliminate those left-hand turn, the red left-hand turn arrows. Those left-hand turn arrows, they force you to stop even when the lane's clear. You could be going, you know, traffic's going on either side of you, but you've got to be stopped because, well, the city officials, the people that run the traffic lights, they know best when you can turn left. You're not even a big adult enough to be able to decide whether you can turn left across traffic or not. You can't even figure that out. Look, if I'm that dumb, if I can't figure out when to turn left across oncoming traffic, then I shouldn't have a driver's license. Just eliminate the left-hand turn red arrows, and we will eliminate wasted time at these lights. That's what this is all about. This is about people spending less time at lights. We don't have to spend millions and millions of Keene tax-paying dollars on this. Our property taxes are high enough. The city council doesn't need to be doing all this stuff. And when it comes to the main Winchester Marlboro roundabout, in the process, not only are they putting in a roundabout and spending $4.1 million or some ridiculous sum of tax dollars, but they're also stealing Tom Eaton's property. He owns the land on which the Foley Funeral Home is currently, and in order to put in that circle, they needed some of his land, or felt they needed some of his land. I feel like they could have put it in without taking his land, but the Keene City Council voted, I believe it was 9-6, to steal his land. And I've got to say, I think that's really sad to use eminent domain in that respect. I feel like it was unwarranted, and we could have gone without it. Now, some would say that eminent domain isn't stealing because, well, it's codified in the United States Bill of Rights. And I would agree with you. Yes, in fact, stealing is codified in the United States Bill of Rights. And we should only use it as sparingly as possible. I feel like this is an abuse, and we shouldn't have done it. Call your city council people, tell them what you think. If you have any comments on any of the news articles I've read or any of my opinion, commentary, you can get a hold of me at mark@freetalklive.com. That's Mark with a K, freetalklive.com. Love to hear from you. Please let me know that you saw it on the television show. I also have a radio show that I do 6 nights a week from 7 p.m. to 10 p.m. nationwide. It's syndicated on 20 stations, so I might think that it came from a radio listener rather than a television viewer. So let me know. Looks like a new study will take a comprehensive look at how to fill the space at 350 Marlborough Street. 5 years later, vacancy remains. You know, we've owned this property at 350 Marlborough Street. The city has owned the property at 350 Marlborough Street for 5 years and done nothing with it. It's just another example of how wasteful the government is. Even if they put somebody in tomorrow, we paid upkeep on this property and paid way too much. It looks like the property was appraised at $3.5 million, and we paid more than that 5 years ago. So, just another look at how our tax dollars here in Keene are getting spent. You know, I was looking at a house in North Keene. It was just I think it was 2 weekends ago. The house was I'm not going to say how much. The property value of the house was about $250,000. The property taxes on that property, $8,000 a year. $8,000 a year. That's just a ridiculous sum of money. Property taxes are way too high here. One of the ways to handle that, to cut down on these taxes, is to cut down on spending. And it just seems to me that the council people, the people in the state legislature, all these people are just happy as they possibly can be to spend my money. You know, it doesn't matter if you rent or own a house. You're paying property taxes. Look, the owner of a house lives in the house and pays the property taxes. That makes sense, right? The renter of a house lives in a house and he pays rent. Well, renting out a property is a business. Businesses have to be profitable, or they won't be businesses for very long. They'll go away. That property tax that owner has to pay on that house that the renter lives in gets passed on to the renter. Everybody who lives in New Hampshire pays property taxes. So I don't think that a sales tax or an income tax is going to solve this problem. All it's going to do is spread out the taxes so you don't know how much you're paying. At least with property taxes, you have to write a check every 6 months, and you have an idea of how much money of yours the city officials are wasting on a regular basis. really we just have to hold our city and state officials responsible for the amount of money that they spend. That's where we have to start looking. The responsibility lies with us, the voters. Here's a little opinion out of the Keene Sentinel. It's very disappointing that our elected officials in both Keene and the county have failed to listen. Thousands of citizens signed petitions, wrote letters, contacted their counselor or delegation, and spoke in opposition of big ticket items such as the jail, the roundabout at Maine. Yet, when the opposition, the delegation still voted in favor of spending $37 million for a luxurious jail, and council voted to spend roughly $4 million to solve a minor traffic problem during rush hour traffic. Some of our representatives have acknowledged that they were elected to make the decisions for us. Not true. They were elected to represent the people, whether they agree with it or not, which is what representation is about. The citizens of Keene spoke out loud and clear against these items. I hope you will remember in November who the individuals are and what they are choosing to support these massive spending projects against our wishes. From Cheryl Pickering, Keene. I like Cheryl. Cheryl's great. Speaking of which, this jail, I think we could all, $37 million to get a new jail, as though the old jail isn't good enough. Now I realize it's a little full, but I think you could probably take, why do we have nonviolent offenders in the jail? Let's not jail nonviolent offenders. I think that would really solve the issue. Look, when you're talking about issues like smoking pot or something like that, I don't think people need to go to jail for that. How does that fix the problem? I mean, even if you think pot's the worst thing in the world, how does locking somebody up in a jail fix it? I think that would solve the jail problem. We could all just go right back to the same old jail. It's not like we need a new jail with all the state-of-the-art fineries for our convicts, do we? I mean, they're convicts. Here's another little bit out of the Sentinel. Income tax is only fair. It is with a sense of sadness that I review the news on the ongoing debates with regard to our schools. People on all edges of the issue are clustering around their own agendas, and we are losing some of the sense of community that has been a hallmark of our region. Each cluster has a valid position, and each cluster can identify the weaker aspects of the other group's arguments. But neither cluster is responsible for the malaise. It would be very helpful if each and every group could recognize the underlying cause, and they could form a coalition with the objective of really solving the problem. At some point, if we are to return to an atmosphere of community and cooperation, we must change the tax policy in the state. This turmoil was predicted. We had only two candidates for governor, one Republican and the other Democrat, who based a large part of their message on the need to reform our state tax structure. Each identified the potential for ill will and the inadequate system of local property taxes for schools presented. I believe that we are both correct in promoting a state income tax with provisions directing the tax would be dedicated to underwriting education. It's from Doug Lowe in Keene. Another problem that I have with income tax is the 16th Amendment. The 13th Amendment, excuse me. The 13th Amendment to the United States Constitution. You remember that one? The document? We don't use it much, but it's important. It's the foundation of law here in the United States. The 13th Amendment says that no man shall be a slave. Now, it was instituted after the Civil War to get rid of slavery. But what is slavery? Slavery is forced work, right? Well, I just filled out my income tax for the federal government because if I didn't, I'd go to jail. Actually, my wife did it. Let's just be clear. Let's give credit where it's due. She must have spent 30 hours with TurboTax doing our taxes. Can you imagine how much longer it would have been if she had to do it longhand? All the write-offs. I own my own business and I own some rental properties. All these things made for write-offs and a lot of work. Well, when you're forced to fill out that income tax form, that's slavery. That's the government forcing you to do something. Now, one can make a better argument for property taxes in the area of freedom, live free or die state, than one can with income tax. I think income tax is invasive. It asks a lot of questions that the government doesn't need to know. The government doesn't need to know how much money I'm making. Really, they don't. They just need to, if we're all going to work together and do stuff, which I can't say I'm entirely for, all these programs that the politicians put in place, but if we're all going to work together and do stuff, what does that have to do with knowing how much my income is? It's invasive. We don't need an income tax in New Hampshire. What we need to do is spend less money. We need to hold our politicians accountable for spending less of our money. Looks like the teachers are still on a work slowdown here in Keene. They're only calling it a work-to-rule situation. Well, this public school problem is a real mess. And I think I've got an idea on it. Now, I would say all public schools, we should just get rid of all public schools. I don't think that there's any reason that everybody should be forced to pay for them and that kind of thing. It just seems ridiculous to me that I have to pay for public schools when I don't have any kids, or when I don't get the choice as to what they teach there. Maybe I don't like the idea of them teaching how to put condoms on zucchinis or whatever it is that they do there. Maybe I don't like the idea that they don't have prayer in school, or maybe I don't like the idea that kids have to say the Pledge of Allegiance, or whatever. Whatever it is that my issue is about public schools, I've got to pay for it, and they're going to do what they want. And that doesn't seem right to me. Now, I know what people say. They say, but what about the poor kids? They won't get an education if we don't have public schools. Well, that's not a public school issue. That's a welfare issue. And fine, if you want to give some kind of private school voucher to to the bottom 10% of earners out there that have kids, I think that would go a long way towards loosening the burden that we have on public schools. Parents, if we had what did I say, $8,000 in property taxes that on this $250,000 home I looked at, let's just use a $200,000 home here in Keene. That's $6,000 in property tax. About $3,500 of that goes towards public schools, government schools. If those parents had that $3,500 per year, they could afford to send their kids to private school. Now, some private schools are significantly more than that per year, but generally, a private school's tuition is about half. It's a fraction of what government schools are, because government schools are inefficient, because government's inefficient every single time. Our teachers should be employed as educators, not as bureaucrats. I think we should end this sort of middle-class welfare that we have that is plaguing us. I'm Mark Edgington, and this is the Keene Weekly News.